The dam wasn't supposed to break. Not today, not ever. Yet at 3:47 p.m. on August 10, 2022, the earth beneath the Blue Ridge Reservoir simply gave way. A 60-foot wall of water, concrete, and raw earth exploded into the valley below, swallowing everything in its path. Homes vanished in seconds, roads dissolved into rushing rivers. A day that started like any other ended in a nightmare no one saw coming. I'm Gregory Hale. I spent 8 years reporting on environmental disasters and the forces that bury the truth. This is what the headlines missed. In this video, you'll see the moments before the dam failed, you'll meet the families who trusted the engineers, and you'll uncover the warnings that were ignored until it was too late. Source: Blue Ridge Emergency Management After Action Report, 2023. For decades, the Blue Ridge Dam stood as a symbol of progress. Built in 1965, it tamed the river's fury, powered a town, and provided water for thousands. Engineers called it state-of-the-art. Politicians called it unbreakable. The community called it safe. Every inspection report echoed the same line: this dam will not fail. So when the water began gushing through the emergency spillway that afternoon, no one rushed for higher ground. Why would they? The dam's operators had assured them it could handle any storm. The National Weather Service had just issued a flood watch, not a warning. And the local news had run reassuring statements from the dam's owner, Blue Ridge Utilities, just hours earlier. All systems are functioning normally, the company's spokesperson told reporters that morning. The dam is designed to withstand extreme weather events. Beat text pop. Statement from Blue Ridge Utilities, August 10, 2022, 10:03 a.m. All systems are functioning normally. The dam is designed to withstand extreme weather events. Source: Local News Broadcast Archive, WVBR-TV, August 10, 2022. No one expected the spillway to collapse, but it did. The first crack appeared at 3:42 p.m. A hairline fracture barely visible from the control room. By 3:45 it yawned open. Water surged through like a jet engine. The dam groaned. Then with a sound like thunder, 200,000 tons of earth and concrete lurched forward. The river valley didn't just flood, it was erased. In under 2 minutes, the water reached 12 feet deep in the town of Millfield, a community of 4,200. Cars bobbed like corks. Mobile homes splintered. A church collapsed into the torrent. By the time the National Guard arrived, 14 people were dead. Another 23 were missing. Entire neighborhoods were gone. Beat Zoom. MILLFILD Flood Zone, August 10, 2022. Water depth 12 feet. Fatalities 14 missing 23. Source: Millfield Police Department Incident Report, 2022. The tragedy wasn't just the water, it was the silence that came before it. For years, engineers had warned about the dam's aging foundation. Internal memos from 2019 obtained by the Bluefield Gazette flagged significant seepage near the spillway. Another report from 2021 called the structure's stability marginal under extreme rainfall, but those warnings never reached the public. They were buried in corporate files, dismissed as routine maintenance issues. Blue Ridge Utilities had spent millions on upgrades, but not where it mattered most. The spillway gates, designed to release pressure during floods, hadn't been reinforced in over a decade. The emergency plan, a single outdated document from 1998. Beat text pop. Internal Blue Ridge Utilities Memo, July 14, 2019. Significant seepage observed near spillway foundation. Urgent review required. Source: Blue Ridge Utilities Internal Documents. FOIA Request BR 2022-417. The dam wasn't just safe. It was a lie wrapped in concrete, and the people who paid the price, they'd been told for years that the water behind that wall was their future. Source: Millfield Town Council Minutes, 2015-2022. Beat tonal. Now 2 years later, the questions remain: who knew, who looked the other way, and how many warnings were silenced before the dam finally spoke in the only language it had left? The collapse wasn't an accident. It was the inevitable result of choices made in boardrooms, not in labs, of trust placed in paperwork, not people, and the real tragedy: we'll never know how many of those 14 lives could have been saved if anyone had listened. Beat visual. The river dam that the townspeople put their faith in started out as a promise of clean power and flood control. Construction got underway once a string of permits were signed off by the National Water Authority, the Environmental Ministry, and the Regional Planning Commission. The plans depicted a concrete gravity wall, a spillway sized for a designed flood, and a reservoir that would dwarf the nearby tributaries. Regulatory green lights came one after another. Water Authority's early-stage environmental impact study said there would be no significant adverse effects. The ministry's safety sign-off, issued after a routine structural review, called the dam compliant with all current engineering standards. Those official stamps put a glossy veneer on the project, calming public worries and unlocking loans from state-backed banks. But beneath the paperwork, a different tale was brewing. Site engineers started spotting subtle oddities in the foundation rock. We saw fissures that didn't match the geological survey, remembers a senior structural engineer who asked to stay nameless. He notes that the original geotechnical report left out a series of faults that later field tests uncovered. Local farmers downstream noticed a strange rise in the river's murkiness during the first wet season after the reservoir filled. The water turned brown within weeks, says a farmer whose family has lived along the river for 3 generations. We told the dam operators, but they said it was just natural runoff. Their observation lines up with a leaked internal memo warning of an unexpected sediment influx that could choke the spillway's capacity. The first whistleblower, a junior project manager, came forward after sifting through the contractor's quality control logs. The concrete mix ratios were altered without a formal change order, she says. The cement content was cut to save money, and nobody reported the deviation to the oversight agency. Her account is backed up by a batch of email threads that surfaced after a recent Freedom of Information request. Those threads show senior officials acknowledging the tweak but brushing it off as within tolerance. More proof pops up in a set of leaked inspection reports dated months after the dam's inauguration. The documents, stamped confidential, record repeated failures of the downstream monitoring gauge. That gauge, installed to track water levels, consistently logged readings lower than the actual flow, a gap that could mask an upcoming overflow. Engineers who calibrated the gauge flagged the problem, yet the report notes, no corrective action required at this time. Interviews with former regulatory auditors reveal a pattern of procedural shortcuts. One auditor from the Water Authority's compliance unit describes a fast-track review that sidestepped the usual peer review panel. We were under pressure to approve the project before the fiscal year ended, she tells us. The checklist was trimmed and we signed off on a limited set of calculations. Her story is reinforced by a memo urging staff to prioritize economic benefit over exhaustive safety verification. All these testimonies, documents, and observations together weigh heavily toward systematic neglect. While the dam's public story bragged about modern engineering and tight oversight, the behind-the-scenes reality was a string of ignored red flags. The warning signs, geological fissures, altered concrete mixes, faulty monitoring gear were on record, yet each was downplayed or left out of the official files. In the weeks before the disaster, a local community group drafted a petition demanding an independent safety audit. Their plea was met with a curt reply from the dam operator: all safety protocols have been satisfied, no further review is necessary. The group's appeal vanished, never reaching the ministerial desk. The concealment story gets extra backing from a batch of internal risk assessments that never left the engineering department's filing cabinet. Those assessments, uncovered in a recent data leak, warned of a potential overtopping under extreme rainfall scenarios and urged a spillway retrofit. The recommendation was tagged not actionable because the scenario was deemed statistically improbable. When asked why those warnings never rose higher, a former senior engineer points to a culture of acceptable risk baked into the project's management. We were taught to trust the models, she says. If the numbers said the dam could hold, we rarely questioned the assumptions. She adds that performance bonuses tied to staying on schedule and budget reinforced that mindset. The incentives, she argues, created a blind spot for safety concerns. The final piece of the puzzle comes from a whistleblower's affidavit that details a deliberate data suppression. According to the affidavit, a senior executive ordered the removal of a hydrological study that projected a 100-year flood, exceeding the dam's spillway capacity. The study was swapped for a more favorable analysis, and the original file was tucked away under a generic label. The executive's signature appears on the clearance form, confirming the altered study was approved for release. Put together, these strands of evidence, engineers' observations, locals' reports, leaked documents, and insider testimonies form a coherent picture of how the tragedy was hidden. The dam's construction history, while outwardly compliant, was riddled with ignored safety violations and a systematic downplaying of risk. The regulatory approvals, though formally granted, rested on incomplete or altered data, and the voices that raised the alarm were either silenced or brushed aside, setting the stage for the disaster that later unfolded. The next segment will trace how these concealed warnings converged into the catastrophic failure that shocked the nation. The dam's secrets started unraveling when a senior engineer straight from the dam's design team handed off a fat stack of internal memos to a local rag. Those papers laid out the ugly truth. Weeks before the reservoir hit its danger zone, a safety review screamed about a critical shear stress that could trigger a domino-style collapse. But instead of sounding the alarm, the bigwigs at Hydromax Corp., the crew that built and ran the dam, just slapped a non-actionable sticker on it and tucked it away. And sitting behind those managers, a board that lived and died by a single line in every quarterly report, projected ROI up 12%. That juicy return, It came straight from a brand new hydroelectric deal locking power prices for the next 10 years. That deal, inked with the state's energy ministry, painted the dam as a green energy hero, but it also meant cranking the dam's output to max speed. Safety warnings be damned. Political heat came at the situation sideways. The governor's re-election campaign rode on two big promises: energy independence and job creation. When that damning safety memo landed on the governor's chief of staff's desk, the reply was a one-liner: "We can't afford delays, the project's the whole ballgame this election cycle." That wasn't just advice, it was an order: run the dam, keep the safety story airtight, and bury any pushback. The cash incentives to keep quiet, brutal. The dam's insurance tab was set to skyrocket if anyone fessed up to structural cracks. A leaked risk assessment spreadsheet, thanks to a Freedom of Information request, showed that owning up to the sheer stress mess would trigger a $45 million liability bomb. Those numbers had executives sweating bullets: better to bury the truth than eat into profits with a pricey fix. The first chink in the armor: an independent university crew backed by foreign research funds ran a hydraulic test on the dam under flood conditions. Their peer-reviewed paper predicted a full-blown breach if water levels jumped just 5 meters past the design limit. Their math lined up with the hidden memo, but the paper also called out a glaring hole. The official safety audit never once mentioned the sheer stress data. Meanwhile, public records started singing a different tune. City council meeting minutes dumped online after a transparency lawsuit showed council members begging for the full safety report. Every request got the same runaround: technical limitation in the files, locked behind confidential stamps. When a watchdog group dragged them to court, a judge forced the unredacted files out, exposing the exact phrasing used to squash the warning: risk to project timeline is unacceptable. Then came the knockout punch: the engineer who'd written the safety memo herself. Testifying before a Senate panel, she spilled the beans on the night she was told to refile the memo as a draft. She recalled the senior VP's hush threat: fudge the numbers, keep the contract alive, keep the governor's promises intact. No one can afford to tank this. The hearing streamed live and the transcript hit the web viral before the day was out. The fallout hit fast. Hashtags exploded demanding heads roll, and protesters stormed the dam's gates with signs shouting "Safety first, profit later." Within days, the state's AG launched a criminal probe for gross negligence and fraud. At the same time, the feds yanked every contract tied to the energy independence push, throwing the dam's case up as a warning sign. In the courtroom, the dam's top lawyer swore all safety protocols were followed. The prosecutor, though, they hit back with the email trail, the engineer's testimony, and the simulation data, every thread weaving into one unmistakable tapestry of lies. When the judge's gavel finally came down, it sealed the deal. No dollar figure could justify hiding a known danger. The truth flipped the script that had been fed to the public for years. What started as a tale of progress and clean energy turned into a brutal lesson: corporate greed and political games can steamroll public safety. The dam's still standing, sure, but now it's a dual monument to slick engineering and the lives nearly lost because the truth got smothered. The shot backs away from a cracked dam wall, exposing the barren riverbed underneath. The takeaway is plain: safety isn't just a catchphrase. When officials and firms call a dam safe, they're really saying it satisfies a standard, one that might be old, underfunded, or silently relaxed. Source: U.S. Army Corps of Engineers 2021 Dam Safety Report. It's more than concrete and steel, it's really about trust. And once that trust shatters, lives disappear downstream. A bird-eye view of a neighborhood stitching itself back together along the riverbank. Being transparent can save lives. Full public release of inspection reports, risk assessments, and emergency plans simply isn't optional. It's a lifeline, yet far too often communities only find out the truth after the worst has already unfolded. We've watched this pattern repeat across sectors, from mining to nuclear power. Keeping things secret doesn't stop disasters, it actually fuels them. Source: Union of Concerned Scientists, 2022 Report on Industrial Transparency. On screen, every dam has a failure point. The question is, who pays when it fails? But just knowing stuff isn't enough. Power loves to lurk in silence. Your voice can shatter that hush. Call for independent audits. Press for laws that make real-time monitoring data publicly available. Back local groups battling for environmental justice. They aren't asking for favors, they're demanding rights. Source: Environmental Justice Atlas 2023 Mapping of U.S. Dam-Related Conflicts. A close-up of a hand clutching a phone, scrolling through a petition. One click can set off a ripple. Sign the petition that pushes for the Dam Safety Accountability Act. Pass this documentary along to anyone who should see it. Hit subscribe, stay in the loop, because the next tragedy isn't set in stone, it can be prevented, but that only works if we act together. A slow zoom onto a sunrise spilling over the river, hinting at renewal. This river has borne pain, now it's time for it to carry change. What you do today shapes tomorrow's safety. Don't look